One of the chief causes of the backbench discontent is Tony Abbott's Chief of Staff, Peta Credlin. Critics say she wields too much power over the PM, is autocratic and doesn't consult enough. Some say either she goes or the Prime Minister should. But it seems Peta Credlin can't win. Others accuse her of not exercising enough power over Tony Abbott, like not blocking the decision to knight Prince Philip. So who is the woman considered the most influential female in federal politics after Julie Bishop? And are the criticisms of her legitimate or not? Madeline Morris has this profile.
The Queen of No, the most powerful woman in politics. Peta Credlin has been called many things during a backroom political career spanning 15 years.
She's a top dog, I should say. Oh, I shouldn't say that. She's the boss.
Have you ever heard him call her the boss?
I've heard her call her plenty of names in meetings. I wouldn't read too much into that.
The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff has been at his right hand for 5 years. She's in large part credited with bringing the discipline to Tony Abbott that vaulted him and the coalition to power.
Peta Credlin, the fiercest political warrior I've ever worked with.
But those same qualities have become points of contention for some members of Tony Abbott's own party.
All the things that you hear people say are about micromanagement. There have been numerous stories about ministers who've been told when they can speak and when they can't speak to the media. They've had their staff selections vetted. And some have even said that you can't send him a text message because you're not sure that he's going to be the one who receives that text message. He may not be the one holding the phone. So there's a real sense that Ms Credlin is omnipresent and very powerful in Tony's ear.
I was particularly disappointed as my many inquiries to the Prime Minister's office, who seemed to have an almost obsessive centralised control phobia over this and every other aspect of Parliament.
One former Chief of Staff says this control is crucial.
Governments can get off to very bad starts if they don't apply discipline from the centre, because everyone's enthusiastic about returning to power and they do all sorts of enthusiastic things which they later come to regret. John Howard learnt that, much to his regret, I think, and he lost a lot of ministers in the first year of his power. Tony Abbott hasn't lost as many ministers, and that's probably a function of having a strong Chief of Staff.
Peta Credlin first came to politics in 1999 as a staffer to the then Liberal Party Senator Kay Patterson. The two have remained friends, despite Ms Credlin going on to work for a host of other politicians, including Robert Hill, Brendan Nelson and Malcolm Turnbull.
Well, I always thought it was important to employ people who are sometimes or often brighter than I am. She is a very, very intelligent woman. She's very competent. She's very likeable. And she's also very, very skilled in understanding the role of the Senate and the House of Reps.
The myth is that she's the Queen of No, that she is this terrifying, tall, domineering person. Is that the Peta Credlin that you know?
No, it's not the Peta Credlin I know, and it's not the Peta Credlin that most people know. I think one of the difficult situations when you're the gatekeeper, you have to say no to people and they don't like it, and that's a very difficult position to be in.
But critics say she's carved out a role beyond that of gatekeeper. This pre-election footage of Peta Credlin dressing down MP Stuart Roberts suggests it's not only the Prime Minister who's been on the receiving end of blunt advice.
Prime Minister,
Ms Credlin made more news today, heckling the Prime Minister from the advisor's box during question time. The government says she told Julia Gillard to bugger off.
And her influence extends even further.
Ms Credlin has been a regular attender of Cabinet. She's been known to play a very pivotal role in determining what issues go before Cabinet. She's extremely close to the Prime Minister. He often refers to her as the Chief. He does so sort of half tongue-in-cheek, but it annoys the hell out of ministers to hear this because there's too much truth in it. That's the way it is. And I've heard stories of MPs and ministers agreeing with Tony Abbott on something in a conversation only to be told later by the Prime Minister that whatever was agreed can't be gone ahead with because the Chief has said no.
At the end of the day, she understands her place in the system. And that place is as a senior advisor, as a Chief of Staff, but ultimately it's with the elected politicians that decisions are made.
So the Prime Minister doesn't just do what she says then?
Absolutely not. I think that's an insult to both Peta Credlin and, more importantly, that's an insult to the Prime Minister.
As criticism of Peta Credlin mounted late last year, Tony Abbott leapt to her defence.
Do you really think my Chief of Staff would be under this kind of criticism if her name was P-E-T-E-R as opposed to P-E-T-A? I think people need to take a long, hard look at themselves with some of these criticisms.
The Prime Minister going on the feminist offensive raised eyebrows, and it's not a view that's universally shared.
I think the critique that Peta Credlin suffers a lot because she's a woman is overstated.
Look, I'm not sure that the gender issue is a major issue. The major issue is she's a great asset to the coalition, and if I were trying to undermine a government, I'd attack the assets.
But has the asset become a liability? Last week, media baron Rupert Murdoch called for Peta Credlin to fall on her sword over the Prince Philip knighthood debacle, tweeting,
"Abbott again. Tough to write, but if he won't replace top aide Peta Credlin, she must do her patriotic duty and resign. Forget fairness."
The PM's Chief of Staff has certainly taken a lower profile this week. She didn't attend Cabinet and she's been absent from the line-up at official functions, replaced instead by the Prime Minister's wife. But Peta Credlin, it appears, is going nowhere.
Just very specifically, though, is Peta Credlin still on your staff today?
Yes.
Okay, so back to the policy issues.
Today, she faced renewed calls to resign.
I think Peta Credlin has unfortunately found herself being the proxy for a lot of criticism of the Prime Minister.
One of the things that people have said to me, and more than one of them have said it to me, is either she goes or he will eventually go. It now looks more likely that he's going to go whether she goes or not.